usually, if we're writing ES6 code, it will always see me declare my functions using const. And the reason that I do that is there's also a difference between const and let. So with let, I can overwrite the value. So let's just go ahead and get rid of that redeclaration there. And so you'll see here I've const as a function, and then I'm not redeclaring it, but I'm resetting it to something called hi, a string, right? And go ahead and take a moment, make this modification, and then pull up your terminal and try running the code. Bam! Assignment to constant variable. So that's the trick with const. You see, when I declare this as let, like this, if I do that, and then let me try running it again here, it'll work. So if I declare something as const or constant, JavaScript with ES6 syntax won't let me reassign it once I've declared it. If you create something as a const and you try and reassign it, JavaScript will throw you an error. And that's pretty useful, especially for functions, because you don't want your program reassigning your functions to something else. Alright, so thank you for that sidetrack. And in the next video, let's go ahead and let's round out our call to map using ES6 syntax and arrow functions. Alright, so let's go ahead here and let's just comment this out. So notice I've selected it. I'm just going to go Control and backslash. I don't like deleting code like that just because of the fact that it tends to kind of illustrate an important underlying concept, and that way you can go back and at least reference it, uncomment it, play with it, see how it works. So let's go ahead and let's really get this thing to work. So our goal here was to return a result of mapped array of objects, where each object has a name parameter which is set to one of these names in this array of strings. Let's do that. So I'm going to do const, I'm going to call my function mapped names, and I am going to go ahead and use an arrow function for my argument, just like this. So you'll notice above there's a couple differences here when I pass this function as opposed to one of the ES5 functions up here. So this right here with the keyword function, that's an ES5 function. With ES6 syntax, rather than using that keyword, which kind of, I've seen this a lot, tends to lend itself to accidental misspellings, typos, things of that sort. In ES6, all you gotta do is this arrow symbol. So to pass our function into our call to map using ES6 syntax, we just put argument, the key symbol of the arrow, and then since we're going to be doing some manipulation inside the arrow function here, we are going to end up using some curlies. We'll see later that arrow functions are pretty flexible and you actually don't have to use a lot of syntax, but for this case, we'll go ahead with it. So let's again do let rockstar equal name, and then return rockstar. Okay, so let's go ahead and console.log mapped names. So once we got that good to go, let's go ahead and take a moment, pull up our terminal, and run node main.js. And there we go. Alright, so now that you've had a chance to really kind of look at how to fill out a call to map using ES6 syntax and let and const and all of that, and pairing that with some of the intuition I'm starting to hopefully provide you here with arrow functions and the differences between const and let and var and all of that, let's continue on downwards and do maybe a little bit more tricky of a manipulation here. So for this challenge, what I'm going to have you do is map through just the first names. So I want just the first names of each artist here. And what I want you to do is to just return the first name, return an array of the names, first names of the artists. Just like that. So return an array of the first names of the artists. And let's store this in a new array called, let's do const mapped first names. So go ahead, give it a shot, and in the next video, we'll go over the solution. Alright, so for those of you that aren't familiar with string methods, you probably had to take a moment and probably do some research, but I'm going to introduce you to a very nice, succinct way to do this using a ES6 arrow function with a little less syntax than the one we did above, and hopefully this will just look really nice. So, alright. So of course, I'm going to assign my result here. This is the result. I'm going to assign it to the call of map on the names array. And let's start by passing my arrow function. Now this time, note that we're not really manipulating anything. We could probably just get away with some method calls. So we can kind of modify our call to the arrow function. And how can we do that? Well, first of all, you'll notice up here that I use some parents around the argument. So one of the cool things about ES6 arrow functions is that really, if you only have a single argument for that function, you don't need to use the parents. You can just say what it is, and then use the arrow key symbol. Likewise, with ES6 functions, I was doing some manipulation up here. I was declaring a variable. So I used some curly braces just to surround it, and I also put an explicit return. Now, quick note, when I say explicit return, all I mean is that I used the JavaScript keyword return, followed by what it is I was returning. Well, here's another kind of cool thing about ES6 arrow functions, which is if you are just returning a single thing and you don't need to do any kind of complex variable declarations or manipulations in there, you can just return it via an implicit return. By that, what I mean is you don't have to use curly braces and you don't have to use an explicit return statement. So in that case, let me show you what that would look like. So I want the first name of each artist. So let's take a moment. Let's think about how we might do that. Well, what if I were to split each name we iterated over here into a 2-element array and then just take the first entry? Well, we can do that because strings have a split method, and as long as we use the space as the delimiter, all I got to do is take 0, the first entry. And of course, for our artist formerly known as Prince, that's going to be a little bit weird, but we'll go with it for now. Let's go ahead and go for it. Oh, and it looks like I forgot to console log my result down there, so give me a moment. Go. Let's try this again. And there we go. David, the, John, Jimmy, Robert, Paul, Jean, Florence, and Sonny. All right, perfect. We've got the first names. All right, so that being said, now let's take that and extend it even further here with some practice with the filter method. So if you'll remember here, there's a slight difference between map and filter. With map up here, we just iterated over each item in the array and we returned some modified form of it or something different that kind of worked off of what we were iterating over. Filter is a very different method. Sure, its syntax might look the same, but it also works on a conditional. So the thing with filter is that your return statement, whether explicit or implicit, must be a conditional. Remember, what filter does is it iterates over each item in the array and it checks to see if each item meets the conditional you provide in that return. If it does, it'll make it a part of the new array that call to the filter method will end up giving back. However, if the element does not meet the conditional you provide in the return statement, it will exclude it from the new array. So my challenge to you here is to take your knowledge from last week and given what I've just provided you, and I want you to give me an array of the artists above where their first name begins with J. So again, I want you to iterate through your array using a call to filter, call vid on names array. You'll have to excuse those key binding statements there. Then what I want you to do is to only return first names beginning with J. So let me clarify that a bit. Only return artists' names whose first names begin with J. So only return the artist names, the full artist names, whose first names begin with J. Store this result in a new array. And all right, given that challenge, go for it. I bet you've got this, and if you get lost, don't be afraid to take a look at what we did last week in class in our practice. All right, so I'm assuming at this point you've given it a shot, and let's go through and let's just take a look at what's it going to look like. So again, I'm going to give myself a few new lines here, and let's start with a new array. Let's call it filtered names J. And again, just like math, all we do is call down our names variable, the array we want to call filter on it. And that's a pretty good starting point. So if you got here, know that you're actually on the right track a good amount. Just like math, filter also takes a function. So let's go ahead and let's do name. And since we're only returning a given conditional, and that conditional is pretty simple, I'm going to go ahead and exclude the curlies and also use an implicit return. So let's think about this. Filter has to work on a conditional. What could my conditional be? Well, let's think about this. This is the name of every artist in this array. So as this call to filter iterates, it's going to go over every single name in this array. Recall also that names are a lot like arrays of characters in that you can access them via indices. So if I want the first letter of a string, it's kind of like accessing the first letter of an element of the first element of an array. So if I do something like this, well, you might be saying that's how you access the first element of an array. Will it work if I want to check the first letter of a string? And well, there's no better way than to just try it. So let's go ahead and compare it to J. And we want capital J here because remember, it's the first letter of our first name, so we're going to use proper capitalization here. And then let's go ahead and just console.log filtered names J. And let's see what happens here. So go ahead and get this good to go. And then let's go ahead and clear out our terminal. Call it. And then let's take a look down here, and there we go. John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix. So in fact, this is a valid way to check what the first letter of a given string is. All right, so I know we're going pretty fast here, but we've got one more kind of filter challenge for you to try and go through. And it's going to combine a lot of what we've done thus far. So what I want you to do now is I want you to again iterate through your names array, store the result in a new array, but what I want you to do this time is I want you to return only the first name of artists whose first names begin with J. And just to give you a hint, you're going to need to chain together both the filter and the math methods to accomplish this. So remember, if I want to chain a method, I do something like this. A.method1 method 2. So again, this is how we chain methods. And so your goal, return an array of first names of artists whose first names begin with J. All right, take a moment, Work hard, give it a shot, take your time, do your research, and if you get confused, always go look back at code you've done before. Good luck. Alright, so honestly, chaining together methods like this is pretty challenging, especially with having to combine the fact that we're only returning the first names of artists whose first names begin with the letter J. But if you took a look at what we did last week, you'll remember that we can just chain filter and map together. And we usually put filter first, and that can let us get exactly what we want pretty easily. So let's try first name J to equals names filter. Let's go ahead, and I'm just going to use the implicit return name, just like above. The reason that I'm putting filter first is I just want to kind of reduce the array down to just names that begin with J. That way, when I chain my call to map out here, map doesn't have to do a ton of work. So let's go ahead and let's just do name 0, just like above, is strictly equal to J. And so there we go. So just like above, we know that this call right here, excuse the train, will only return an array full of names that begin with J. Well then, if I want to just create an array of first names, let's take a look up here. Remember, this is how we got first names before, so then let's go ahead and do name.split. And again, we're going to use the space as a delimiter. 0. So go ahead and take a look at this. And let me explain what I'm doing here. So first I call filter on my names array. I'm filtering through, checking to see if the first letter of each name I iterate through in the array begins with J. If it does, I make it a part of the new array that this call to filter returns. If not, it doesn't get passed into the new array. Then I chain that with a call to map. So my call to filter returns a new array, and it's only going to have names that begin with J in it. When I chain a method like this, the array returned by filter automatically gets passed to map. So don't worry, there's no real black magic in that, and it should make pretty intuitive sense that your call to filter is just going to pass this on to the next method that is chained up. And then, again, I'm going to iterate through each name in the array, and I'm going to take that name, and I'm going to call split, which is a string method on it, using a blank space as a delimiter. And the call to split is going to return an array where the first entry is the first name, just before the blank space, and the second entry is the last name, which is after the blank space. And then, of course, if I want the first name, since it's the first entry in the array returned by the call to split, I just access the 0th, or the first element of that array. Let's go ahead and see this thing in action. First name J. All right. Let's clear that out. Again, let's go node, main.js. Bam! There we go. So instead of John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix, I don't just have John and Jimmy. So if that seemed really challenging to you, go ahead, take a minute, rewind the video, rewatch it if you have to, but just study that, look closely, and try to get the idea that by calling filter and then chaining map after it, filter knows to pass its result to map, and that we can really just chain these simple arrow function expressions that we pass as arguments to each of these given methods to accomplish what is a pretty complex parsing result. Alrighty then, so if you thought that was all there was to this week's practice, well, we've got more here, and this time we're going to be creating some much more complex data. How, you ask? We're going to create an array of objects. And so having an array of strings is definitely a pretty common way that data will come to you in a given web application, but an array of objects is usually the default. The reason for that is a collection of objects is how stuff is stored in MongoDB. So it's good to practice kind of indirectly this way. Let's go ahead and start with the following. So go ahead, follow along with me, and let's create our data. Let's do let shapes equal brackets. I'm going to go ahead and just bring them down like this, and then follow along here as I create the following shapes. So our shape, of course, is going to have a name property. I'm just going to add some blank space here. Let's create a square. It's going to have a color. Make it green. And it's going to, of course, have 4 sides. Let's go ahead and create the next shape object. Name is going to be triangle. Color is going to be green. And sides is going to be 3. Good. Then, let's go ahead and do name is going to be rectangle. Color is going to be red. And sides is again going to be 4. Name is going to be pentagon. Color is going to be green. And size is going to be, of course, 5 for pentagon. And then let's do something interesting with a name is going to be, let's do a hexagon. And of course, hexagon's color is going to be red. And naturally, the sides of our hexagon, there are 6. My favorite number. All right, so take a moment, get that filled out, and in the next video, we're going to again just go through a couple more examples of filter and map. So, all right, see you then. Okay. So this is designed to help you kind of practice in what's going to be much more of a real world scenario, how you might use map and filter to kind of iterate through much more realistically structured data. Let's go ahead, and here's my first challenge to you. What I want you to do is to call map on your shapes array. And of course, I'm one with the typos. The typos are with me. All right. Now that we've got that good to go, the next thing I want you to do after call map on your shapes array is I want you to return a new array of shape names. So I want you to call map on your shapes array, store the result in a new array, and that new array should contain just the strings of each it should be an array of the names of each shape in our shape array. So go ahead and take a moment, give it a shot, and in the next video, we'll take a look at the solution. All right, so if you kind of took a look up here, you notice that before we called map names and we turned it into an object and then we returned this result of first names, this is actually a much simpler exercise. The only curveball I'm honestly throwing you here is I'm forcing you to remember some stuff about objects, whether with bracket or dot notation. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we might do this. So I'm going to create const and call this shape names. And so again, let's call it on shapes.map. And so let's think about this. I'm creating an array that stores the names of all my shapes. So realistically, that means that I'm just going to have to iterate through a single argument, each shape. I'm going to use my arrow function. And what I'm going to return here is shape.name. Just like this. All right, and let's take a look here and see what happens. Perfect, that looks good. Let's go ahead and go in here. Go to the console, and node main.js. Looks like I have a typo there under pentagon. Give me that for a second. And there we go. Got that fixed. Let's bring back up my terminal. Bring it out. Try running it again. And if you look down here, got square, triangle, rectangle, pentagon, hexagon. Perfect. We're good to go. Alright, so for those of you that aren't quite used to, aren't quite comfortable with, or kind of were starting to forget how to access properties of objects, I hope that was just a useful little warm-up exercise. We're going to do something a little bit more challenging here with a call to filter. And so what I want you to do this time is to call filter on your shapes array. And I want you to return me a new array of only the shapes whose colors is green. So again, call filter on your shapes array and give me back a new array where every shape in that array, its color is green. And of course, I want the full objects in this array, so don't worry about just returning the name or something like that. It's not that complex. Just use your knowledge of filter and check to see if the shape's color is green, and if it is, return that back in a new array. All right, give it a shot. Let's go. All right, so I'm assuming, of course, you took a stab at this point, and so what I'm going to do here is just start out by doing shapes, and then I'm going to call my shapes array and call filter on it. There we go, there's a good starting point. So let's think about this. So again, the difference between filter and map is that map and filter both take functions as arguments, but map needs to return a modified element of the array of which it is iterating over. Filter needs to return a conditional that it will check every element of the array it is called upon against to return a new array. So in this case, again, I really only have one argument, which is the shape. So for every shape in my shapes array, what do I want to check? Well, I want to check if its color is green. So how do I do that? Well, shape.color. That'll probably give me the color property, right? And I want to check if it's strictly equal to green. Okay, so then let's see if that worked. Alright, so that's pretty good to go there. And actually, before we show the answer, follow me along for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and just comment out some of these earlier console log statements. Let's comment out that one there. 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 And let's comment out that one there. And yeah, that should be good. All right. So let's go ahead and save my file, of course. Pull up my console. Clear it out. And node main.js. Let's check through here. Okay, square's color is green. Name, triangle, color green. Perfect. Pentagon, color green. All right. Let's take a look here. Square green. Triangle green. Pentagon green. Perfect. We're good. All right. So in this case now, for our final kind of filter and map challenge here, I'm going to again have you call filter on an array. But my challenge to you this time is to, rather than returning a array of, or I should say a new array where each shape is green, I want you to go ahead and call filter on your shapes array and return for me an array where every single shape in that array has a number of sides strictly less than 4. So again, call filter on your shapes array. Call filter on your shapes array. And what I want you to do is to check each shape in that array if a number of sides that it has is less than 4. If it is, give me back, make it a part of the new array that filter returns, and store that in a new result. So go ahead, let me just write this down here. Call filter and shapes array, and return new array of shapes who have number of sides less than 4. All right, give it a shot. Good luck. All right, so hopefully this was a nice, kind of easier challenge. But for those of you that are stuck, let's go ahead, let's take a look, and let's just walk through the answer. So again, const, I'm going to call this less than 4 sides. That is an awful variable name, but it's descriptive, if overly so. Let's do shapes, filter, perfect. And then, of course, I'm really only going to have a single argument, so I can omit the parens. And then all I'm going to do here is check and see if shape.sides is strictly less than 4. Okay, that should make pretty intuitive sense. Let's go ahead and console.log less than 4 sides. Perfect. It's good to go. Let's go ahead and pull up our terminal here. And actually going back to my code here real quick, I'm just going to go ahead and comment out our earlier console log statement. So this is the only one. Back to our terminal. Let's clear this out here. Do node main.js. And there we go. Triangle, color green, sides 3. That is in fact the only shape in our array here that has a number of sides less than 4. Alright, so like I said, I hope that this homework, this practice here, just kind of helps you further along or enhance your understanding of map and filter, as well as ES6 syntax and arrow functions. So possibly tomorrow, hopefully soon, I'll be able to create another homework video that'll have us creating a small, nice, fun application of Vue.js. But until then, I hope that this was insightful and it helps you better understand these two very powerful methods that you will particularly be using in the React.js library to dynamically render HTML. Other than that, have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for joining.